Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books. Let's get started. Okay, so today we're diving deep into Teresa Wiltz's book, The Real America. It's part memoir, part history, and really just a fantastic way into understanding race in the U.S.
It really is. She uses her own life, her own identity as a kind of lens to look at this incredibly complicated, often hidden history.
Yeah, and her basic point seems to be that America's always been multiracial, messy, but we have this obsession with these rigid categories, like you have to be either this or that.
Exactly. And she doesn't fit easily. She calls herself a bourgeois, shape-shifting, rock-loving, world-traveling integration baby, which tells you a lot right there.
That phrase, integration baby, really stands out. Growing up right after the Civil Rights Movement, living across those lines.
Right. And she had this moment seeing the musical Passing Strange where she felt like, okay, I fit everywhere. It connects back to her cousin calling their family a Heinz 57 mix.
I think the structure of the book is key here. It's brilliant, really. She starts personal childhood stuff, then digs into her family tree, her genealogy, and then zooms out to the big picture, like how the whole idea of race was even constructed in America.
And that journey is what makes the argument so compelling. You see the stark contrast between her lived reality, descended from slaves, slave owners, Native Americans, the works, and this kind of simplified Fantasyland version of America that ignores all that complexity.
So let's start where she starts chronologically.
Right.
Her first memory of race, April 5th, 1968. She's 6 years old in D.C.
Yeah, a really jarring introduction. The principal's voice comes over the school intercom, panicked, telling everyone to run home immediately. Martin Luther King Jr. had just been assassinated.
Imagine being 6 and hearing that. She runs home, totally confused, doesn't even really get what race means yet.
And then sees a looter running through her backyard, arms full of stuff. That's her intro to the civil rights movement, just raw chaos and fear.
Wow. And then, pretty soon after, that life changes. Her dad finishes medical school.
Right, the family moves, and they leave that relatively comfortable black neighborhood in D.C. for Staten Island.
Which she calls Manhattan's far less tolerant cousin. Ouch.
Yeah, and they immediately hit that wall of housing discrimination. Her dad keeps finding vacant apartments that somehow become unavailable the moment he shows up. It's just grimly familiar.
So that shift really sets the stage for more direct personal experiences with racism.
Definitely. And one that seems to have really stuck with her happened in 5th grade at her Catholic school, St. Joseph Hill Academy.
This story is tough. The kids, even the teacher, are literally debating out loud right in front of her, whether she's Puerto Rican or Negro.
Can you imagine? She just wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She finally just whispers, "I'm black."
And you see how quickly she absorbed the message that having brown skin was, as she puts it, a liability?
Yeah, the internalized stuff starts early. She talks about wishing she could wake up white and blonde, like Twiggy or, Marcy Brady.
Right. It sounds almost trivial, but it shows how deeply those societal messages were sinking in.
Absolutely. And she learned about the nuances, the hierarchy within it all, like how lighter skin comes with privileges.
He tells that story about her mom and cousin, both very light-skinned.
Riding right up front in a segregated bus in Atlanta, just daring anyone to challenge them. It was a survival tactic, that knowledge.
Okay, so moving forward a bit. High school. The family moves again, this time to Atlanta.
And Atlanta, at that time, was really snarkily divided. Geographically, culturally, racially. She lived on the wealthy black Southwest side. Think Mayor Maynard Jackson, Andrew Young as neighbors, real black excellence.
Right. But she went to school on the wealthy white Northwest side.
Exactly. So she felt this intense pressure, like she had to pick a side.
And she chose the black side.
She did. And what's interesting is how she describes that choice. She says that within the black community, the old one-drop rule sort of worked differently. It wasn't just about exclusion. It actually embraced this whole rainbow of possibilities, including lots of other mixed-race kids like her.
So it became a space of belonging, even with its own complexities.
Right. And then she goes off to Dartmouth for college, early 80s, and she decides she's going all in. She wants to be black, 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 Addie black.
Yeah, she really dives into negritude studies, African dance, literature, fully embracing that identity she chose.
But then travel happens, and that really throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, big time. The story from Mexico is fascinating. She's studying abroad, introduces herself as a black American.
And this Mexican border just matter-of-factly says, "You're white, la blanca," not la negra, like a previous student, or even la morena, the brown one.
She was totally thrown.
Huh.
Affronted is the word she uses. She actually gets out family photos to try and prove her blackness.
Because for her, having built this identity so carefully in the U.S. context, any suggestion she wasn't 100% black felt like a judgment, like she didn't quite belong.
It shows how much race is tied to specific places and histories.
Completely. And that becomes even clearer later when she's a journalist. She's in Afghanistan 2002 wearing a headscarf.
And her own colleague doesn't recognize her at first.
Yeah.
Sees her as just sort of generic ethnic.
Right. And then she's interviewing Hamid Karzai, the president, and he pauses and asks, "Are you Indian lady, Pakistani lady?"
Wow, it just completely dismantles that rigid American binary she grew up with. Race is totally contextual.
So all these external experiences, this confusion about how others see her, it pushes her to look deeper into her own family story, her genealogy.
And this part of the book gets really specific and really complex. But maybe start with that jarring moment in 1992. She's covering a KKK rally.
Yeah, in Wisconsin. And she actually asks the Grand Dragon, point blank, what about mixed race people like her?
His answer is just chillingly absurd.
He tells her, very sorrowfully apparently, that she'll never be admitted to the kingdom of heaven.
Just, wow. Okay, so contrast that hateful ideology with her actual family history. Let's start with her dad's side, the Louisiana Creoles.
Okay. Her great-grandfather, Galbert Wiltz, born in 1846, son of a German immigrant planter and his mixed-race slave concubine.
And Galbert himself looked white.
White-skinned, blue-eyed, but crucially, he identified as black, lived his life as a black man.
And there's an inheritance story there too, right?
Yeah, a really potent one. The German father actually freed Galbert before the Civil War and left him some valuable oil-rich land in Louisiana.
But it wasn't straightforward.
No. The father asked his politician brother to look after Galbert's interests, but the brother basically ignored the request and tried to grab the land himself. Family betrayal tied up with race and money.
Which leads to that family saying her grandfather passed down.
You can't trust white folks, especially when they are related to you. A hard lesson learned through direct experience.
Okay, now the maternal side, South Carolina. Equally complex.
Oh, absolutely. Her great-great-grandmother, Mary Wilson Gambrell, born around 1866, pale skin, blue eyes. Family lore says Irish and Native American Cherokee, Catawba, maybe others.
And this is where the census records get really interesting.
Fascinating. Mary married George, who had both black and Native ancestry. And over the years, the U.S. Census listed Mary as, get this, sometimes white, sometimes black, sometimes mulatto, back to black.
It perfectly illustrates how arbitrary and frankly confused the government's own definitions of race were. They just kept changing the boxes.
Exactly. It wasn't based on some fixed biological reality. It was about shifting social and political whims.
And there's a great little detail about Mary's daughter, Aunt Lottie.
Yes, Aunt Lottie, Teresa Wiltz's great-aunt, became the first black woman in America to parachute out of an airplane back in the 1930s.
That's amazing. It just adds another layer showing the richness and unexpected turns within black history itself.
Totally. So when you put all these family stories together, the Louisiana Creoles, the South Carolina side, the slavery, the land, the betrayals, the shifting identities,
it becomes clear that this messy, complicated story, full of denial and pain, but also resilience, this is the quintessential American story.
It completely blows up the myth of racial purity. Wiltz argues the country has been amalgamating right from the start.
Which leads us perfectly into the more historical section of the book, where she unpacks how race was constructed in the first place.
Right. She makes this bold claim. In the beginning, there were no white people.
Explain that, because obviously there were people from England, France, Spain.
Exactly. They saw themselves as English or French or Spanish, distinct nationalities. Just like people from different parts of Africa saw themselves as Yoruba or Igbo or Akan. The idea of a unified white race didn't exist yet.
And early on, status wasn't solely based on skin color.
Not entirely. In the very early colonial period, some Africans came as indentured servants, just like poor Europeans, and could eventually gain their freedom.
So what changed?
Economics, mostly. By the mid-1600s, particularly in colonies like Virginia, the planter class needed a stable, controllable, lifelong labor force for cash crops like tobacco.
And enslaving people based on skin color became the most efficient, brutal way to do that.
Precisely. Virginia started passing laws that specifically defined black people as slaves for life, based on color. And crucially, that status was passed down through the mother. This legally created a permanent enslaved class.
And in creating blackness as a condition of lifetime servitude.
Yeah, they simultaneously invented whiteness as its opposite. as the category of people who were inherently free, inherently superior, and entitled to power and resources was a social and legal construct.
But even whiteness wasn't initially open to everyone from Europe, was it?
Not at all. It was very exclusive for a long time. Wiltz mentions Benjamin Franklin basically saying only the English really counted as properly white, and the first Naturalization Act in 1790 limited citizenship to free white persons, but who counted was debated for decades. Irish, Italians, Jews, they weren't always considered fully white.
So race was always this tool, constantly being defined and redefined to control resources and maintain power structures.
Absolutely. And the government kept trying to draw these lines, often in absurd ways. Wiltz points to Thomas Jefferson, of all people, creating this bizarre chart calculating how many generations it took for black blood to be cleared until someone could be considered white.
From mulatto to octoroon. It's just horrifyingly pseudoscientific.
And it continued. She mentions how in 1978, the U.S. government literally defined Asian for bureaucratic purposes by drawing a line on a map somewhere between Iran and Pakistan. It's that arbitrary.
Which really brings us to her final arguments, her big takeaways.
Yeah. After laying out her personal story, her family history, and this historical context, she draws some powerful conclusions. One key one is about Barack Obama's election.
She argues it wasn't the start of some post-racial era.
Exactly. Not the cause, but an effect. An effect of slow, deep cultural shifts that had been happening since at least the 1950s. Society was already changing, becoming more mixed, more complex. His election reflected that reality rather than creating it.
So that old, rigid black-white binary.
She basically says it's outdated, done, over, passé. It just doesn't reflect the reality of America anymore, if it ever truly did.
And where does that leave her personally? How does she see her own identity at the end of this journey?
Well, she fully claims her identity as a black woman deeply connected to African American history and culture. That's fundamental.
But it's not the only thing.
Right. She also embraces being this racial Rorschach blot, someone who looks like she could belong in many places, wherever other brown people live. She recognizes all the different strands, European, African, Native American, that make her up.
So to be American, in her view, is to be your own melting pot.
Essentially, yes. To embrace the complexity, the contradictions, the amalgamation.
There's one final observation she makes that's really striking, about how whiteness and blackness have been defined historically.
Ah, yes. That whiteness was often defined by, it wasn't specifically, the absence of blackness. It was the default, the unmarked category.
But blackness was never defined by the absence of whiteness. It had its own substance, its own cultures, histories.
Precisely. And that leads to a really provocative thought for us today, doesn't it?
Yeah. We know the demographics are shifting. Genetic studies suggest millions of white Americans have some African ancestry, maybe unknowingly. Projections show whites becoming a minority in the U.S. around 2040.
So the question Wiltz implicitly raises is, what happens when whiteness is no longer the default? When that status of being seen as just people without a racial qualifier starts to erode?
Will everyone, regardless of their background, finally be forced to confront their own specific, complex racial heritage, much like Wiltz had to? It's definitely something to think about as the American story keeps evolving.
Indeed. It pushes us all to grapple with that messy, mixed reality that's been there all along.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge. Spread the word.